My own grandson told his fiancée that the old man wouldn't be at their Christmas dinner because he didn't fit their aesthetic. I'm James Carter, 72 years old, Air Force veteran, and I've spent 40 years building something my grandson never bothered to ask about. He announced on social media that Grandpa was too embarrassing for their influencer Christmas special. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Posted it for his 300,000 followers to see, and suggested I spend the holiday at the VA center instead. What he didn't know was that I didn't just have a trust fund set up for him. I was funding his entire lifestyle, his fiancée's career, and half the people at that Christmas dinner. And by December 26th, all of it was gone. I didn't argue. I didn't call him. I just picked up my phone and made 4 calls that would change everything. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're from, because this story starts 45 years ago when I made a promise to myself about the difference between giving someone everything and teaching them to earn anything. That promise would cost my grandson more than he ever imagined. Most people look at me and see exactly what my grandson Dylan sees: a 72-year-old man who drives a 2006 Chevy Silverado with rust spots and 200,000 miles on it. Someone who wears the same 3 flannel shirts from Costco and brings store-brand cookies to family gatherings where everyone else shows up with artisan desserts from boutique bakeries. Dylan Carter, 26 years old, 300,000 TikTok followers, lifestyle content creator, and absolutely convinced that his grandfather is a relic from a forgotten era. "Grandpa, you literally dress like you're going to fix a furnace," he told me last Thanksgiving when I showed up to dinner. "Melissa's followers expect a certain aesthetic for our content. We're building a brand here." Melissa Torres, luxury lifestyle influencer, 250,000 Instagram followers, came from money and treats my grandson like he's his ticket to even bigger things. They met at some influencer conference in Los Angeles 2 years ago and have been inseparable ever since, documenting every moment of their curated life together. The first sign I was losing my grandson happened 8 months ago. He started referring to the trust fund I'd set up for him as my investment portfolio in conversations, then my financial foundation, then just my money. "When Melissa and I get married, we'll obviously need to upgrade everything," he announced over coffee. "The trust fund will cover the down payment on a proper house in the right neighborhood. You know, somewhere that photographs well." Photographs well? That phrase stuck with me like a splinter. The second sign came when he posted a TikTok from my living room. The camera panned across my modest furniture, my outdated television, my collection of military medals in a simple frame on the wall. The caption read, "POV when your family has different priorities." The comments were swift and brutal. His followers saying things like, "Why doesn't he help you more?" and "generational wealth should flow down, not get hoarded." Dylan screenshotted the harshest comments and sent them to me in a text message. "See, Grandpa? Even strangers understand that it's time to pass things on to the next generation." I never responded to that text. I just saved it in a folder I'd started keeping. What Dylan doesn't know is that I've been watching his content for months, watching him show off the penthouse apartment in downtown Denver that I pay $7,000 a month for, the $45,000 engagement ring he proposed with that came directly from an account I manage, the matching Tesla Model Ys he and Melissa drive, both leased under my business entity at $3,000 a month combined. In his world, these things just appeared because he worked hard on his content, built his following, and deserved the lifestyle. I was just the old veteran who'd gotten lucky with some military pension and disability checks. My grandpa's from a different generation, I heard him tell Melissa's parents at a charity brunch last spring. Blue-collar mindset. He doesn't really understand how wealth works in the modern economy or how important it is to invest in your personal brand. He tries, but the digital world isn't really his thing. The digital world. As if I hadn't been quietly managing a portfolio that would make most of his followers' parents look poor. Melissa found this charming, apparently. It's so authentic that Dylan stays humble despite his advantages, she told her mother while I was standing 10 feet away getting coffee. He's not flashy about his family's money. His family's money? As if it had just materialized from nowhere, as if 3 generations hadn't worked and sacrificed and built something real? But the breaking point wasn't the comments or the assumptions or even the casual disrespect that had become Dylan's default setting with me. It was what happened 5 weeks ago, when Dylan and Melissa came to my house to discuss Christmas plans. They walked in like they were touring a museum exhibit on how poor people used to live. Melissa immediately started taking photos of my living room. Not in a nostalgic way, but in that detached way influencers photograph things they find amusingly outdated. "The aesthetic here is very authentic, vintage Americana," she said to Dylan while snapping pictures of my Korean War-era coffee table. "We could do a whole series on intergenerational wealth gaps." "Grandpa," Dylan said as they settled onto my couch, "Melissa and I have been planning our Christmas content calendar. We're doing a luxury holiday series. The whole thing is about elevated celebrations, high-end entertaining, that whole vibe. We've got a photographer coming, a videographer, Melissa's styling team. It's gonna be massive for both of our platforms." "Sounds like you've put a lot of thought into it," I said. "We have. And the thing is, we need everything to be on brand. The house, the decorations, the people, everything has to fit the aesthetic we're building." "I see. Where do I fit in this aesthetic?" Dylan glanced at Melissa. She gave him a look I recognized immediately. The look that said, "We talked about this, stick to the script." "Grandpa, we love you, but this is really important for our careers. We need this Christmas to be perfect. Melissa's got $100,000 in brand deals that depend on this content performing well. One wrong element could tank the whole thing. Her team has already flagged potential issues. We can't take risks." "I'm a potential issue that's been flagged?" Dylan grabbed his keys. "Look, I love you, but I need you to understand that this is business. Real money is on the line, life-changing money. And sometimes that means making tough choices about who gets included in what." He left without saying goodbye. Melissa followed, but not before taking one more photo of my living room for what I assumed was her intergenerational wealth gap series. I sat in my house for 2 hours after they left, looking at the same furniture Dylan had found so photographically unsuitable. The coffee table I'd bought in 1976 with my first paycheck after leaving the Air Force. The bookshelf I'd built by hand when my daughter was born. The service medals that apparently didn't fit anyone's aesthetic. Then I walked to my office, the small room at the back of my house that Dylan had never asked about, never shown any curiosity toward, never wondered what I did in there during all those hours I spent working. I opened my laptop and pulled up the files I'd been maintaining for 40 years. Carter Holdings, LLC and Corporation papers dated 1983. Patent documentation for 3 aerospace components I designed while working as a civilian contractor after my military service. Licensing agreements with 4 major defense contractors. Portfolio statements from investment accounts most people don't know exist. Stock holdings in 27 companies, 12 of which I'd invested in at their founding. Bank statements showing liquid assets that would take Dylan's breath away. Real estate holdings across 7 states. And the trust fund documents. The trust fund Dylan talked about like it was his personal ATM, like it was money he'd earned through follower counts and engagement rates. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I read through every page, every clause, every condition I'd carefully written with my attorney 23 years ago when Dylan was born. Then I made a list of 4 phone calls I needed to make, and I thought about my grandson telling me I'd be more comfortable spending Christmas at the VA center while he and his fiancée collected 6 figures in sponsorship money in the apartment I paid for, wearing clothes I funded, driving cars I leased, and eating food I'd made possible. First call. Patricia Morrison, my attorney for 38 years. She picked up on the second ring. James, I haven't heard from you in months. What's going on? Patricia, I need you to prepare some documents. I need them ready by Monday morning. What kind of documents? The kind that teach my grandson the difference between being given everything and earning anything. Patricia was quiet for a moment. She'd known Dylan since he was born.
Second call. Daniel Kim, Chief Financial Officer at Carter Holdings. He answered immediately. James, good to hear from you. We weren't expecting our quarterly review until January. Change of plans, Daniel. I need you to execute something for me. Complete financial audit of all accounts connected to Dylan Carter. Every lease, every payment, every transfer for the past 3 years. I need documentation of every dollar. Daniel was quiet for a moment. James, that's going to reveal quite a bit. That's the point. How long will it take? I can have preliminary numbers by tomorrow afternoon. Complete documentation by Monday morning. Make it happen. And Daniel, I need you to prepare termination notices for all ongoing financial commitments. Leases, credit lines, transfer authorizations, everything. Dylan's name on anything gets flagged for immediate cessation. James, are you sure about this? He's your grandson. He told me not to come to Christmas because I don't fit his aesthetic. Daniel, who'd known me for 15 years and had never heard me speak with anger in my voice, let out a low breath. I'll have everything ready by Monday morning. Every document will be legally airtight. Third call. This one was the hardest. Angela Chen, Director of the Denver Metro Veteran Support Network, the organization I'd been quietly funding for 12 years. Angela had no idea where her annual operating budget came from. She knew it arrived through a law firm every January 1st, reliable as sunrise, enough to keep her programs running and her staff paid, but she'd never known the source. Angela, it's James Carter. James, what a surprise. Is everything all right? Everything's fine. I'm calling because I need to tell you something about your funding. My funding? The anonymous donation that covers about 60% of your annual budget, that comes from Carter Holdings. It comes from me. Angela was silent for a long moment. James, that donation is $1.2 million a year. For 12 years, you've given us over $14 million? $14.3 million, actually. The fund increases by 5% annually to account for inflation and program expansion. Angela's voice cracked. James, why are you telling me this now? Because I'm about to do something that's going to get public attention. National news, probably. Social media. My grandson's going to make sure of that. And when it does, reporters are going to start digging into my finances. They're going to find Carter Holdings. They're going to find the donations. I wanted you to hear it from me first, not from some journalist calling for a comment. What are you about to do? I'm about to teach my grandson the difference between what he earned and what I gave him, and I'm going to do it in a way that makes sure he never forgets the lesson. James, whatever you're planning, I trust your judgment, but I need you to know something. The programs we run, the veterans we help, the families we support, that's all because of you. You've changed thousands of lives. Whatever your grandson did, whatever disrespect he showed, it doesn't change the good you've done. I know, Angela, but sometimes the hardest person to help is the one closest to you. Sometimes you have to let them fall so they learn how to stand. She understood. She'd spent 20 years working with veterans, watching families struggle with the gap between service and civilian life, between sacrifice and entitlement. Call me after Christmas, James. I want to hear how this turns out. I will. And Angela, the funding doesn't change. No matter what happens with Dylan, your programs continue. Always. I hung up and sat in my office as the sun went down over the mountains. 4 calls made. 4 people who understood what I was about to do and why it mattered. Patricia would handle the legal framework. Daniel would document the financial reality. Sarah would stand beside me as a witness. And Angela represented everything I'd built that Dylan had never bothered to learn about. I opened my laptop and started going through the files again. But this time, I was looking at something specific. Dylan's social media presence. 300,000 TikTok followers built on a lifestyle he thought he'd earned through follower counts and engagement rates. I watched his recent videos. The floor tour showing off the floor-to-ceiling windows and designer furniture. Captioned, "My space, my sanctuary, my success." The Tesla charging station video explaining why electric vehicles were the only ethical choice for conscious consumers. The morning routine video shot in the bathroom of the penthouse, showing off the smart mirror and rainfall shower, talking about the importance of starting your day in an environment that reflects your worth. I watched Melissa's content too. Her Instagram was a carefully curated gallery of luxury. Designer bags arranged on the white marble counter of their kitchen. Outfit photos taken in front of the massive windows with the Denver skyline behind her. Couple shots of her and Dylan in matching athleisure wear, both holding green smoothies, both looking at the camera with that specific expression influencers use that's supposed to convey authentic happiness, but really just conveys awareness of being photographed. Her most recent post was about the upcoming holiday content series. The caption read, "Getting ready for the most elevated holiday celebration. Every detail curated for perfection. Sometimes you have to make hard choices about your aesthetic vision. Can't wait to share this magic with you all." Brand partnerships with 3 luxury companies tagged at the bottom. 140,000 likes in 8 hours. 3,000 comments. Most of them variations on "I can't wait" and "This is going to be amazing." And "You deserve a perfect Christmas." I screenshotted everything. Then I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I created my own social media account. Nothing fancy, just a basic profile with my name and a simple photo. The one from my retirement ceremony at Peterson Air Force Base in 1995. Me in full dress uniform, with 26 years of ribbons across my chest. I didn't post anything, didn't follow anyone, just set it up and verified the account. Patricia called me at 8 that evening. "James, I've drafted the documents. Do you want to review them before I finalize? Read me the critical sections." She did. The trust fund termination was clean and absolute. All funds to be redistributed to charitable organizations, specifically veteran support services, within 30 days of notification. The lease terminations were equally clear. All payments to cease immediately upon delivery of notice. The vehicle leases would be repossessed within 72 hours. The credit lines would be frozen and closed within 24 hours. Dylan would receive formal notification via certified mail, email, and text message simultaneously. No ambiguity, no grace period, no room for negotiation. "Patricia, this is exactly what I needed. I'll have the final documents ready by Sunday afternoon. You can execute everything Monday morning. One question, James. Are you prepared for how Dylan's going to react?" "I'm prepared for him to react exactly the way he's been taught to react by a world that told him he deserved everything he wanted, which means I'm prepared for it to get ugly before it gets better. Then I'll make sure every legal protection is in place. Thank you, Patricia, for everything. James, I've known you since 1986. I've watched you build Carter Holdings from nothing. I've seen you give more to charity than most people make in 10 lifetimes. And I've watched you try to give your grandson the life you never had. Sometimes the greatest gift is letting someone discover what they're actually made of. That's what I'm counting on. Sunday came and went. I spent it organizing my files, preparing my documentation, and thinking about the conversation I'd need to have with Dylan after everything fell apart. Because it would fall apart. Monday morning at 9 a.m., everything would change. The trust fund would be terminated, the lease would be canceled. The car leases would be flagged for repossession. The credit cards would stop working. And Dylan would wake up to discover that the life he thought he'd built was actually the life I'd been quietly funding, while he convinced himself he'd earned it all through follower counts and engagement rates. I thought about calling him Sunday night, giving him one last chance to apologize, to recognize what he'd done, to choose family over aesthetic. But I didn't, because the lesson wouldn't mean anything if I softened it before he felt the weight of his choices. Monday morning arrived with fresh snow covering the mountains, and my phone showing 15 degrees outside. I made coffee, watched the sunrise, and at exactly 9 a.m., I called Daniel. Execute everything. Within 3 hours, it was done.
By noon on Monday, the ripples had started. I didn't hear from Dylan right away, but I didn't need to. Patricia's office confirmed that all the notifications had been delivered: email, certified mail, and text. I imagined him waking up, pulling on his curated designer loungewear, making himself one of those green smoothies Melissa liked to post about, and then trying to use a credit card that no longer worked. I pictured the confusion first, then the anger. And sure enough, by early afternoon, my phone began buzzing. 10 missed calls, all from Dylan. 3 voicemails, each angrier than the last. Half a dozen texts, all variations of, "What did you do?" and "You can't do this to me." I didn't answer. I didn't respond. Because this wasn't about a conversation anymore. It was about reality. And for the first time in his adult life, my grandson was about to confront reality without a safety net. Around 2 o'clock, Melissa entered the storm. She called me once, then sent a long text message dripping with both indignation and thinly veiled condescension. "James, whatever issues you have with Dylan, punishing us financially is not the solution. You're sabotaging our careers, our future, our livelihoods. This is incredibly unfair. We've worked so hard to build something. Please reconsider before you ruin everything." I stared at that text for a long moment, then put my phone down without responding. Worked so hard. Those were the words that twisted the knife. Not because they were true, but because they were so blatantly false. They'd curated. They'd posed. They'd tagged brands. They'd performed for likes and engagement. But real work? The kind that builds legacies and sustains lives? No. They had no idea what that even meant. By late afternoon, Patricia called to check in. "It's done," she said. "Every clause executed. Dylan is legally notified. By tomorrow, his apartment management company will post notice of lease termination. By Wednesday, the vehicles will be repossessed. Credit accounts are already frozen." "And the trust fund?" I asked. "Dissolved. The funds are in escrow and will be dispersed to the veteran charities we outlined. Ironclad, James. There's no way he can contest it." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the medals on my wall. "Good," I said softly. "Then it begins." Patricia hesitated before speaking again. "James, brace yourself. He's not going to keep this quiet. From what you've told me, his entire persona depends on the illusion of wealth and success. If that collapses, so does his brand. He'll lash out publicly, maybe at you." "I know. That's why I made sure I had my own account set up. If this becomes a public battle, then I'll answer it publicly." That prediction proved correct faster than I anticipated. By 6 o'clock that evening, Dylan had posted a TikTok. I didn't follow him, but Sarah texted me the link with 3 words. "It's starting, James." The video opened with Dylan in his penthouse living room. Except this time, there was no smoothie, no upbeat music, no polished transitions. Just him, staring into the camera with raw anger. "My own grandfather," he said, "decided to ruin my life today. He cut me off financially. No warning, no discussion, just pulled the rug out from under me and Melissa. After everything we've built, after all the work we've done, He decided we don't deserve any of it. I'm sharing this because people need to understand what kind of man hides behind a fake, humble veteran image while hoarding wealth and letting his family suffer. He doesn't care about me, doesn't care about family, he just cares about control. The comments poured in, hundreds within minutes, most of them sympathetic. That's toxic behavior, one read. Generational wealth belongs to the next generation. Another said, he sounds abusive, you don't need him. Thousands of likes. The tide turning against me, without them knowing a single fact. I expected that. I counted on it. Because what Dylan didn't know was that Patricia had already helped me draft a public statement. Short, factual, and devastating. At 8 o'clock that night, I logged into my new account and posted for the first time. A photo of me in uniform, taken the day of my retirement ceremony. My caption was simple. My grandson believes I ruined his life by taking away what he calls his money. What he doesn't tell you is that the apartment he lives in, the cars he drives, the engagement ring he proposed with, all of it was mine. Every cent of it. The trust fund he counted on wasn't earned, it was given. And today it was redirected to veterans who actually know the meaning of sacrifice. I am James Carter, Air Force veteran, business founder, grandfather, and I will never apologize for teaching the next generation the difference between entitlement and effort. I pressed post. Within an hour, it had 50,000 likes. By midnight, 120,000. By morning, national news outlets had picked it up. Headlines: Veteran cuts off influencer grandson, redirects fortune to veterans charities. Comment sections turned sharply. Where Dylan's followers had once sympathized, now they were asking hard questions. Wait, so none of it was his? He's been pretending this whole time? Respect to Grandpa for setting the record straight. Melissa tried damage control, posting an Instagram story about toxic family dynamics and protecting our energy. But the tide had shifted. Brands that once lined up to work with them suddenly went silent. By Tuesday, 2 sponsorships had pulled out. By Wednesday, another 3. And on Thursday, Christmas Eve, I got another message. This time not angry, not arrogant, just 4 words. Grandpa, can we talk? I didn't reply immediately. I let him sit with it, the way he made me sit with the idea of spending Christmas alone at the VA center. Finally, I wrote back, we'll talk tomorrow, at Christmas dinner. My house, 6 p.m. Come as you are. No stylists, no photographers, no brand deals. Just family. When I set my phone down, I felt something I hadn't in months. Not anger, not disappointment, but a quiet sense of resolve. Tomorrow, Dylan would walk into my house stripped of everything he thought defined him. No penthouse, no Teslas, no trust fund. Just a 26-year-old man facing the consequences of choices he'd made. And maybe, just maybe, that would be the beginning of him finally becoming someone worthy of carrying the Carter name.
Christmas Day arrived cold and quiet, the kind of Colorado morning where the air itself feels sharp. I woke up before dawn, brewed coffee, and sat in the kitchen with the hum of the old refrigerator keeping me company. There were no expensive decorations in my house, no hired photographers, no stylists adjusting table settings for brand sponsorships. Just a tree I'd picked up at the hardware store, strung with the same lights I'd used for the past 20 years, and ornaments made by my daughter when she was still a child. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. It was real. By late afternoon, I set the table, 4 plates. One for me, one for my daughter who was flying in from Dallas, one for Sarah, and one left open for Dylan. I didn't know if he would come. His message the night before had been short, almost timid, but silence hung between us for so long that I wasn't sure he'd actually follow through. Still, I set the plate, because no matter what he had said about me, no matter how deeply he had hurt me, I wasn't going to turn him away. At 5:50, headlights swept across the driveway. A car door slammed. I opened the curtain to see Dylan standing there alone, no Melissa in sight. He wasn't dressed in designer clothes this time, just jeans and a hoodie. His shoulders were hunched, his hands jammed into his pockets. For the first time in years, he didn't look like an influencer or a brand ambassador. He just looked like a young man who didn't know where else to go. When I opened the door, he stood frozen, his mouth working like he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Finally, he said, "Hi, Grandpa." "Hi, Dylan. Come on in. Dinner's almost ready." He stepped inside, glancing around the living room that Melissa once called vintage Americana. This time, there were no mocking photographs, no commentary about aesthetics, just silence. He noticed the medals displayed on the wall, the old bookshelf, the tree with its uneven lights. His face softened. We sat down at the table just as Sarah arrived, crisp and composed, her dress uniform jacket on despite being retired. She winked at me as she sat down. Dylan stared at her chest full of ribbons and medals, eyes widening. "Colonel Mitchell," I introduced. "My oldest friend. She's family." Sarah leaned forward, her voice steady. "Merry Christmas, Dylan. Your grandfather tells me you've been busy building a brand. I spent my life building something too. It just didn't involve hashtags." Dylan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I didn't realize that your grandfather served 26 years in the Air Force, designed aerospace components that kept this country safe, built a company from scratch, funded veteran programs for over a decade. Sarah's words cut like a blade, but her tone wasn't cruel, just firm. Dylan swallowed. I never told me any of that." "No," I said quietly, "because you never asked." The table fell silent. My daughter served the food, trying to ease the tension, but the weight of truth sat heavier than any meal. Finally, Dylan set his fork down and looked at me. "Grandpa, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said what I did. About Christmas. About you. I wasn't thinking." "Yes, you were," I corrected gently. "You were thinking about the cameras, about the money, about the image you and Melissa wanted to project. You told me to spend Christmas at the VA center because I didn't fit the aesthetic. That wasn't an accident. That was a choice." His eyes glistened, and for a moment I saw the boy I'd raised after his father died, not the influencer who lived in a rented penthouse. "I didn't realize how much you were doing for me. For us. I thought—" trailed off. "You thought it was yours, that you'd earned it." He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Dylan, everything you had, the apartment, the cars, the lifestyle, it was all an illusion. I built it. I paid for it. I allowed it. And when I took it away, the illusion collapsed. That's not punishment. That's reality. And reality has a way of teaching lessons you can't learn from followers or brand deals." His tears slid down his cheeks, though he tried to blink them away. "I don't know what to do now. Melissa left this morning, said she can't be with someone who doesn't have stability. I've lost sponsors. I don't even know how to pay rent next month." "You don't," I said firmly, "because you won't be living in a penthouse anymore. You're going to learn what it means to actually stand on your 2 feet. That means getting a real job, learning skills, building something that doesn't disappear the second someone closes a checkbook." Sarah chimed in, her voice softer now. "Your grandfather didn't cut you off because he hates you. He did it because he loves you, because entitlement is a poison, and if he let you keep drinking it, it would destroy you." Dylan covered his face with his hands. For a long moment, the only sound was the clink of forks on plates as the rest of us kept eating, giving him space to sit with his own thoughts. Finally, he lowered his hands. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Will you help me, Grandpa? Not with money. I don't want that anymore. But will you help me figure out how to actually build something, for real this time?" I felt a lump rise in my throat. That was the first honest thing he had said to me in years. I reached across the table and put my hand on his. "I'll help you, Dylan, but only if you're willing to start at the bottom, the way I did. No shortcuts, no brand deals, just work." He nodded, fresh tears slipping down. For the first time all evening, I believed him. As we finished dinner, I looked around the table, at Sarah, at my daughter, at Dylan. No photographers, no sponsorships, just family. And I realized something. Dylan might have lost everything material in the span of 3 days, but maybe, just maybe, he had gained something far more important, the chance to become a man. And that, I thought, was the kind of Christmas gift no amount of brand money could ever buy.
The days after Christmas were quiet. For the first time in years, Dylan didn't post any videos. His social media accounts went silent, and the curated couples content with Melissa disappeared completely. She unfollowed him, deleted their photos together, and moved on faster than I'd expected. To her, Dylan had never been the prize. His access to money had. Without that, he wasn't part of her aesthetic vision anymore. For Dylan, it was like being dropped into freezing water. At 26, he suddenly found himself with no income, no home, and no direction. He moved out of the penthouse in Denver when the lease formally expired in early January. When the moving company came to repossess the furniture he couldn't afford to keep, he showed up at my house with 2 duffel bags and a face full of shame. "Just for a while," he said quietly, "until I figure things out." I didn't make a speech. I didn't scold him. I simply pointed to the spare bedroom. "Sheets are in the closet. You'll be responsible for your meals and your own laundry. If you're under this roof, you'll live like a man, not a child waiting to be catered to." He nodded, and for the first time in his life, he meant it. The first 2 weeks were rough. Dylan had never held a full-time job outside of content creation. He'd never filled out a job application, never sat through an interview, never had to explain what he could actually offer an employer beyond his follower count. On his first attempt, he came back from a retail store frustrated. "They didn't even care about my social media numbers," he said. "They just wanted to know if I had customer service experience." "Do you?" I asked. He looked down at his shoes. "No." "Then why would they hire you?" "Dylan, the world doesn't pay you for existing. It pays you for adding value. The sooner you understand that, the sooner you'll stop being angry." He didn't argue. That was progress. By February, he'd landed a job at a hardware store. Not glamorous, not high-paying, but honest. The kind of work that requires showing up on time, learning, helping customers, stocking shelves. At first, he hated it. He came home sore, frustrated, complaining about rude customers or heavy lifting, but gradually, something shifted. He started telling stories about regulars he helped, a retired contractor who gave him tips, a single mom who needed advice on fixing a leaky faucet, a veteran who recognized his last name and asked if he was related to James Carter. "Yeah," Dylan had said, almost shyly. "That's my grandpa." The man had smiled. "Your grandpa's a good man. You're lucky." When Dylan told me that story, he didn't make eye contact, but there was pride in his voice that hadn't been there before. By spring, his perspective had shifted further. Instead of chasing brand deals, Dylan used his social media differently. His videos weren't about luxury anymore. They were about learning. Clips of him stocking shelves, fixing things around the house, asking coworkers questions. One video showed him repainting the old coffee table in my living room, the one Melissa once mocked for being vintage Americana. The caption read, "Turns out, not everything needs to be new to be valuable. Sometimes the old things just need a little care." That video hit 1 million views in a week, not because it was polished or glamorous, but because it was honest. For the first time, Dylan's content wasn't performance. It was real. By summer, he had built a modest but loyal following that appreciated his humility and growth. He wasn't racking up luxury sponsorships anymore, but he'd started collaborating with small businesses, local carpenters, veterans organizations, hardware brands. His income was nowhere near what it had been in the penthouse days, but it was his. Every cent earned by his own work. The turning point came on Veterans Day, nearly a year after that infamous Christmas. Dylan stood beside me at a fundraiser for the Denver Metro Veterans Support Network. Angela Chen had invited him to speak, not because of his follower count, but because of his story. When he stepped up to the microphone, I expected nerves. Instead, his voice was steady. Last year, I thought my life was over when my grandfather cut me off. I blamed him, called him unfair, thought he was cruel. But he didn't ruin my life. He saved it. He forced me to face the truth that I hadn't earned anything I had, and when it was gone, I had nothing left but excuses. This year, I learned how to work. I learned what it means to earn respect. And I learned that the greatest inheritance my grandfather could give me wasn't money. It was a chance to start over. The room erupted in applause. I felt Sarah's hand squeeze my shoulder, and for the first time in years, I felt hope swell in my chest. Not for me, but for Dylan. That night, back at home, Dylan sat with me in the living room. The coffee table gleamed with fresh paint, a symbol of both old and new. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Grandpa, I don't expect you to ever give me money again. I don't want it. But I do want your guidance. Teach me what you know about business, about investing, about building something real." I studied him for a long moment. His posture was different now. No arrogance, no entitlement, just a young man humbled by life, finally ready to learn. "All right, we'll start small. First lesson, patience. Building something worth having takes time. You can't rush it." He smiled faintly. "I think I finally understand that." Months later, I reflected on the whirlwind of that year. My grandson had lost everything material, but in return, he gained character. Melissa had faded into the background of luxury influencers no one would remember 5 years from now. Dylan, meanwhile, had begun shaping a life grounded in integrity, not aesthetics. And me? I'd kept my promise, the one I made to myself 45 years ago, the promise that I would never give someone everything without teaching them how to earn something. It had been painful. It had nearly broken our family apart. But in the end, it gave Dylan the only inheritance that mattered, the chance to become a man. So when people ask me if I regret it, canceling the trust fund, pulling the rug out, letting my grandson fall, my answer is always the same. No, because sometimes the only way to lift someone up is to let him hit the ground first. And that, I believe, was the greatest Christmas gift I ever gave.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.